Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Friday Live. It's been a long while since we had Friday Live. Good afternoon. Welcome to the call. So, I'm going to take a minute to kind of set up all the channels. But today we're talking about how to overcome anxiety, helping your child or supporting your child to overcome anxiety. So, if you're just joining me or if you join me here, let me know that you're here. I'm going to trying to set up all of the channels. So we're streaming on Facebook and on Instagram, then also on YouTube. So whatever channel you are, if you let me know that you are here, I can acknowledge you. Welcome, Instagram people. I see you. Good afternoon and welcome. I see more people on Instagram joining already. Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for being here. Today we are, like I said, going to look at how to overcome anxiety, how to help your teenagers actually overcome anxiety. So just in a moment, I'm going to make sure that everything is okay. Please confirm Instagram that you can hear me, and then Facebook as well. If you're here, let me know that you can hear me. Welcome to the conversation. If you're catching a replay, you're also welcome. Replay gang, I see and acknowledge you. No, I don't see you. I acknowledge you. Welcome. Just drop a comment in the comment section and let me know that you are catching a replay. Also, let us know from where you are watching. So, good afternoon again. Welcome, Thrive family. I see some persons from Teen Success Academy. Thank you for joining me. Overcoming anxiety and how to help teenagers overcome anxiety. So, this has become a recurring conversation between myself and a few teenagers, and so I decided to do a Friday live because on Friday lives I get to talk to parents, I get to share feedback with a number of adults um, on some of the things that we are observing with teenagers that we work with and things like that. So this is uh, this is my channel for interacting with other adults and getting you to also join in the support for helping our teenagers to thrive, raising teenagers who thrive. So the conversation has come up a number of times about overcoming anxiety and why are we having a lot of young people who are experiencing anxiety and in the extreme cases depression, all right, and some other variations of mental health issues. And that is why this conversation is coming up today. In fact, I'm going to have a training sometimes specifically for teenagers, and uh, where we will have to now get in depth into personal talk with those that are primarily affected with these issues. But today, I'm just going to talk about anxiety from a general perspective, maybe touch a few specific things, but my concern is really to provide us with strategies to support and to help teenagers around us to live healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives. So I'm going to go through some issues like causes of anxiety. I'll draw probably more on the symptoms so that if you observe certain things, you know what to look out for and you know when to start asking more questions and when to start, seeking for help and intervention for your teenager, for your child, for your ward, whatever the case may be. Then I'm also going to dwell on providing you with strategies, practical strategies that you can use for supporting your teenagers, not just to manage anxiety. A lot of the conversation I have come across on this subject deals with managing anxiety, and it comes across as something that cannot be overcome. Yes, I know that anxiety is something that every one of us will have to deal with from time to time, but then um, it's not a sentence to depression. And a lot of the mental health conversation also kind of makes it look like doomsday for young people. So everybody is, experiencing something of some sort. But let's get into the conversation real quickly. So if I'm looking down here, I'm looking at my Facebook community. And then if I'm looking in this direction, I'm looking at the Instagram community. Facebook and YouTube are down here with me. And then there's this other device for Instagram. But if you drop a comment, I'll be able to, see it and reply. Hello, Adisa Mizolushi from Benin. Welcome. I see you on Facebook, and I see like a few other persons there. I see 5 persons on Instagram, 7 persons here. All right, so let's get into it. What is anxiety all about? What is this crisis all about? Generally, it's a common emotion, right? And that's the way I like for us to look at it. Anxiety is an emotion that pretty much everybody is going to experience, kids, teenagers, and even adults. Okay, but for young people, it's usually before or during particular activities that they get to experience this emotion. In the most typical sense, in the most basic sense, it is your brain's natural response to some sort of danger, to some sort of perceived danger, perceived threat. So that response is supposed to help you survive. It's supposed to help you, like the fight or flight emotion. Generally, it's supposed to help you protect yourself. And that's what anxiety is in the most basic form. You get this feeling that something is wrong, something is not right here, or a threatening situation, or a threatening activity, or something like that, and then your body triggers, this kind of emotional response, and that's what anxiety is basically all about. But then anxiety can also occur when there are non-threatening activities, when you are in a non-threatening situation. Okay, so you just get anxious. Um, so that's why I use the word perceived threat, because the threat might be real or imaginary. It might be a real threat or an imaginary threat. A real threat is somebody is threatening to start a fight. Somebody is threatening to maybe blackmail you or something. It could be really any situation. But imaginary threats could be you have to present a talk on assembly grounds on Monday morning, and you are assuming that all these people are going to see all your flaws, how you are so bad at public speaking, and all that and all that and all that. Any of this situation can trigger anxiety. So um, when there is more cases of you feeling anxious over really, really, really non-threatening situations, then there's a problem. Another thing to note is that with teenagers, mood swings and being moody can be a common experience. Teenagers oftentimes will experience mood swings, feeling somehow. Hi, Mr. Haniel, I see you. Good afternoon, sir. Okay, so it can be common to have young people with mood swings, feeling depressed, um, quote and unquote. Anyways, it can be common, but when it becomes an ongoing experience, when it becomes something that is continuous. So this guy has been moody for 24 hours, 48, 72 hours, and stuff like that. Then it is a signal that something more serious is going on, and that thing more serious could actually be depression or any other forms of mental illness or stuff like that, and you really want to take note of that. But if you let the common things slide, then you're probably going to lose sight of when something more serious begins to happen with your teenager. And so it's important that you pay attention. It's important that you continue to have conversations. It's important that you continue to have safe environments where your young people are free to express themselves. We're going to talk about strategies in a little while. But what are the more prominent? Some are not prominent, some are even subtle signs of anxiety, symptoms of anxiety, if you like. So for young people with anxiety, they usually will manifest some sort of constant fear, constant worry. Like I said in my post before this live video, I said usually worry or feelings of anxiety can be normal. Like it can be a usual experience for even adults or young people. But certain times it is no longer normal, certain times it is no longer the usual thing. So this child or this young person is experiencing constant fears, constant worry. Most of the time it is almost irrational. Like you really cannot, it has no basis. I'll give you an example. Something happened today. Earlier today, somebody sent, and maybe you have seen it. Somebody sent me this. It was a forwarded message on WhatsApp, and some of these things that we forward on WhatsApp, even as adults, it was talking about this impending heat wave in Nigeria. That a particular heat wave is coming, and the temperatures are going to rise as high as 50 degrees Celsius in Nigeria and stuff like that. Then they started quoting some things that happened in Singapore, some other ones that happened in Indonesia, how these temperatures are high and here. And what's the other funny thing that was written in that post is how drinking cold water caused one man's blood vessels to explode and things like that. And I quickly replied, I said, who is parading all these kind of stories around? And that is just one example of so many funny things that can create some irrational fears in people. My response to the post, I was replying to the post, and I said, sometimes the fear you create by circulating all of these unnecessary conversations is actually more dangerous than the conversation you are trying to start up in the first place. So you create this kind of anxiety where people are now afraid to go outside of their house. You can be afraid of drinking a bottle of cold water. You can be afraid of so many irrational fears. Okay. And when you see these things happening with your young person, then there's trouble. You never know who they're listening to, you never know what they're watching, you never know what what crew they are hanging out with and what kinds of conversations are going on there. There's also the conversation around puberty for young people. And so your child is experiencing puberty, which makes it very important for you as a parent to be the one having critical conversations with your child. So your child is experiencing puberty, and they tell the child that oh, at 14, you don't have a beard, then it means something is wrong with you. And then that child carries that information, hook, line, and sinker, and start trying out some extreme things in order to solve what was told to them that is their problem. Or they have a pimple somewhere and they start to obsess. Naturally, a teenager is going to obsess with body image and things like that. But without the right kind of support, without the right kind of information, then you will create a possibility for something that was otherwise a natural experience to become something else, blown out of proportion and creating some other kinds of problem for that individual. So when your child is manifesting constant and irrational fears, constant and irrational worries, you want to pay attention and probably provide more support and some kind of guidance in that area. There's the case also of increased or persistent low moods. I said mood swings are natural for young people. Mood swings are natural for teenagers. Today you are high, to the other day you are down, and things like that. It could happen. Those are natural responses to hormonal changes in the body. But if it becomes extended, if it lasts for longer periods of time, and your child is becoming more irritated over things, maybe with their siblings, maybe with something that naturally would not have irritated that child, you want to also pay attention there and see where they need some kind of help or not. This child that used to be bubbly, this child that used to be very active, this child that used to be an outgoing child, all of a sudden dies and becomes the opposite of themselves. Okay. He now becomes very reserved. He now stays indoors. He now doesn't want to talk to anybody. He now doesn't want to go to the usual places where they like to go. You want to pay attention to uh, what is going on in their emotions and whether they are having all of these other things that we're discussing. The other symptom could be a child is struggling to concentrate with in class, with the academics, or even in a normal conversation. So you're talking with the child and they are drifting. This again, if it lasts for a while, is going to manifest in some sort of decline in academic performance. So the child used to do straight A's before, and all of a sudden they're now down to B's, C's, D's, in very severe cases. That is a sign. That is something that you should watch out for. Um, Also, watch out for troubles with sleep, issues with it could be reduced sleep or excessive sleep. It could be any of those two extremes or irregular sleep patterns. Okay, all of those are signs, symptoms that will tell you, okay, something is going on with this child's emotions. Now, there are other kinds of symptoms that are even more physiological. But when it comes to physiological symptoms for anxiety, it's usually more observable by the individual. So if I was talking with a teenager, that is experiencing these things, they might be able to describe what it is they are feeling. Feelings or manifestations could be so somebody is anxious about something, and then they start to experience headaches, like serious headaches over a perceived threat or something. You're going to, I use the example of public speaking a lot because that's something that usually most young people are scared of being put in a sport, to address a crowd or something like that. And then this child is so anxious that they are telling you that they are having stomach aches. Now, I've also seen adults who shove that away and say the child is pretending. That child might not be pretending. He might actually be having real stomach aches. I don't know if you have ever been really, really threatened that you start feeling physical pain in your body because of a perceived threat. That has not happened. That has not happened. So those are physical signs and symptoms of anxiety that, if left unchecked, unaddressed, could lead to some other things. Somebody's hand is trembling and vibrating over a particular situation. It's not normal. Those are now extreme manifestations. Like I said, sometimes it's only the person that is experiencing these signs that can really, really describe what it is. Sweating in the palm, different kinds of physiological responses to the subject of anxiety. Some persons could have increased heartbeat, so your heart is beating. I'm sure that you can relate with that when you are going to do something that you're not comfortable naturally doing. Okay, trouble with concentrating on that can lead to some of these things that I'm describing. But like I said, when it has to do with the physiological signs and symptoms of anxiety, you really want to be having conversation with the person who is experiencing these things, because that is not easily observable by you as a parent or just an onlooker. You might not necessarily observe whether this person is really having a headache or they're having a stomach ache or uh, shivering. Some people even have, fever. You must have heard of things like exam fever. So exam is coming. Exam is next week. Your child was fine, or maybe it happened to you growing up. You were fine normally, like you were good until 1 week to exam, or even the morning of exam. Then from nowhere, this temperature, you start running temperature. This fever just comes, out of nowhere, and it happens. So, like I said, for certain persons, when you're growing up, depending on the kind of adults you have around you, we have adults that that tend to shut young people down and belittle what it is that they are feeling, instead of acknowledging and providing support and help for that young individual. Other extreme signs, this is, I can almost say, is full blown depression, is when you start noticing changes in weight, whether the child is losing weight extremely or gaining weight unnecessarily. Those are two things. Like I said, with sleep, it could be losing sleep or sleeping too much. But with weight loss or weight gain, sudden weight loss, sudden weight gain, you want to be sure that your child is not already trying out things, trying to, deal with their anxiety in their own way, which would include stuff like using substances, which would include stuff like using medications, over the counter drugs, instead of asking for professional help and guidance. You want to be sure that your child is safe and your child is receiving the kind of help that they are supposed to receive. So those are like the extreme things you want to look out for. But I've mentioned the very subtle signs, the ones that you can observe, and the ones that only the person experiencing them can observe. But also, maybe the child is losing interest in something that they are previously excited about doing. You also want to pay attention to that. So with anxiety, it is very crucial that you identify what the triggers are. I've talked about the causes, I've talked about the symptoms and the signs. But when I'm dealing with the young person in question, it's very important that you also, beyond the signs, symptoms, and all of that, identify what the triggers are, what situations and what activities induce this nervousness, what activities induce the worry, induce the anxiety, and all of those kind of things. Okay. Another thing I'd like to mention here as a side note is that with adults, sometimes a child is experiencing anxiety over something that the parent is going through or something that another adult is going through. I was sharing something. I've made a number of posts and I've shared it on some platforms with parents when I talk about things like conflicts in the home, things like separation and divorce, some other kinds of things like that, like death or loss of a loved one. A parent has lost a job. Okay. What are those things? Maybe you move locations, you change locations, you lived in a particular city and then you're moving to another city. Now, with these kinds of experience, why it's important for me to mention is a lot of times parents want to belittle the experiences of the child, and you say, you're not the one providing for this house. Why are you the one forcing over things that adults should be forcing over? That's one part of the neglect that can happen. The other part of the neglect that can happen is you know so much. So you use your superior knowledge to judge the feelings and emotional responses of a young person. You are wrong. In case nobody told you before, hear it from me. Your superior knowledge does not in any way invalidate the feelings of your teenager. Acknowledge you know the thing. You probably have perfect answers to that situation, but you are judging. You know that thing where we like to judge other people from our own positions. You're judging that young person, you're judging that child from your position of superior knowledge. I always make this analogy and said, you cannot tell me how to feel pain. You don't have that right. You don't have the right, or for instance, when we talk about discipline for young people, you don't have the right to beat a child and tell the child not to cry. You don't have the right to inflict pain and now decide how I'm going to feel the pain. You do not have that right. Now, you're not even the one inflicting this pain, but you are going through an experience that is entirely your own experience. But realize that as an adult that is responsible for the life of a young person, your experiences somehow rub off and have impact on the young person that you are raising. So it could be, when I say death and loss of a loved one, for instance, it could be the death or loss of a friend. It could be rejection from a crush. Okay, so I like this person and they don't like me back. That could create a very serious issue for your teenager, depending on their age and level of experience and exposure and things like that. Like it could be you are the one who lost a job. Your child is the one who is feeling more anxious about that experience. You're the one who lost your accommodation or you need to relocate, you need to move places, or your child is the one who is feeling more emotional impact of that experience that you as an adult is having. Like I said, your knowledge, your superior knowledge cannot invalidate the feelings of that child. And so what you want to do is to find strategies for providing support for that child. Let me take a moment to talk about the causes of anxiety. I've already started to mention some of them: adult issues, things going on at home and stuff like that. But a few other points here, and it's important to mention personality types. Yes, personality types. There are certain. If you read the book by Tim, is it Tim Lahaye or Tim Lahaye? I hear a number of different pronunciations for that name, but the book is Why You Act the Way You Do. In that book, you will realize that eh, eh, one of the things you're going to learn is the different temperaments that we all have, and everybody, manifesting different kind of things. But another very important observation there is that certain temperaments and certain personality types are more prone to negativity. Certain temperaments and personality types are more prone to perfectionism, and so that tendency for perfectionism, that tendency for negativity will also predispose that individual to issues about anxiety and the rest of them. Some personality types um, are more critical of themselves. They tend to be more critical. And it's not one personality type. Of course, there is no one personality type. What you have is a mixture of all the basic types of personality and expressions of that individual. So it's something to take note of, that personality types can also predispose your child, can also predispose your teenager to uh, cases of anxiety and depression. And then before I leave that, also personality types determine the extent that they feel these emotions. So everybody can feel depressed from time to time. The extent to which type A feels depressed is different from how type B feels depressed. The extent, the response that they generate towards that emotion is also different and stuff like that. Like I said, the dynamics are more personal. And when you're dealing with an individual young person or child or whoever that is affected, then we can begin to profile more tailored solutions for that child or for that individual. The other thing that causes anxiety for a lot of young people is pressure for performance. Pressure for performance. Okay, I have a problem with raising young people, and we're doing a lot of that now. We're seeing a lot of that now. If you have a child in a school where all these schools where we're not giving children certificates for attendance, certificates for participation, award for best brush teeth, award for finest whatever. There are some flimsy kind of awards that schools are dishing out to young people just to massage maybe the emotions of the child, or more importantly for the school is to massage the egos of parents and those that provide them patronage. The more a child is exposed to all those kind of things, something is going to happen as that child grows up, especially into adolescence. You're going to realize that the world does not care that much. Real life does not really reward you for attendance. Real life does not reward you for for participation. Real life rewards you for effort, results. So as your teenager begins to actually get exposed to real competition, maybe in secondary school, in university, they start to fear academic failure. They start to fear that perfectionism, because you have sold a false idea that this guy was a superstar all his life, when you should have paid more attention to helping them identify their weaknesses and growing out of those things. But you have sold them the idea that they are the best in everything since sliced bread. That that false reality is going to fade at some point, and then that child is going to begin to have serious issues with pressure to perform, pressure to really prove themselves in certain environments and in certain spheres. And so that fear of failure, that fear that is created by perfectionism can really become a problem. The pressure to excel in their academics can really become a problem and lead to serious issues of anxiety, moodiness, and sometimes even depression. So you want to pay attention to that. Honestly, I'm not even sure what solution to proffer to you on this matter, except to say that you want to give your child a a more realistic sense of life and reward systems. You reward somebody for, I don't know, if you reward somebody for waking up from sleep, if you give somebody an award for doing things that are basic, then they get to environments where they realize that nobody awards you for doing things that are basic. People will respond to you for creating real value, and how you communicate the value that you create is exactly how people are going to respond to you, not necessarily because there's a place for showing up, there's a place for, coming and being present. There's a place for that. But I'm sure that if you listen carefully, you're going to understand, what I'm really trying to communicate with the issue about performance pressure with young people. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen with young people. I've seen all those powerful things that they write in results at the end of a school term. uh, Now nobody come. There's no, I don't know. Many people have eradicated first, second, third positions and things like that. Maybe there are genuine reasons for that, but I'm saying that in real life the dynamics are different, and you must incorporate in your conversation with your child that in real life the dynamics are different. So I've talked about personality type, I've talked about adult issues, performance pressure, social perception. This is a general conversation, concerns about how people are going to perceive me, concerns about peer pressure, concerns about fitting into the crowd. I wrote in my book, Why Teenagers Fail. One of the chapters deals with the crisis of belonging, the crisis of uh, the crisis of connectivity, the crisis of, not really the crisis of connectivity, but the crisis of after identity, that crisis of finding your own tribe, that crisis of finding acceptance. It's called the affinity crisis. That crisis of who is going to accept me. A lot of young people face the fear of embarrassment, fear of social exclusion. In the social media age, fear of being cancelled on social media so that nobody will say you are the one that said it this way, or you are the one that nobody will say that you are too uptight and personal, you are too, what of all the fancy words you know that they use to describe that, but essentially is social anxiety. This part of the conversation really is about social anxiety. So young persons have concerns about how they are perceived, it's peer pressure, it's how the fear rejection, the fear of rejection, the fear of embarrassment and stuff like that is one thing that can trigger feelings of anxiety for a young person. Then finally, there's the issue of physical change, which is this part is the most natural for a young person. As a growing adolescent, you're going to experience changes in body shape, reproductive organs, hormonal changes. Things are just going to happen. And then there is an anxiety related to all of these shifts going on in the body. And it affects both the boys and the girls, but I think it affects more teenage girls when it comes to body image and stuff like that. The teenage girl is more in danger of you know these kinds of manifestation. Identity issues. Again, I'll go back to the talk about what you discuss with your child. The rule or the what's it called? The law of first mention, the principle of first mention is that when it comes to very important conversations, it's most important, it's crucial that your child hears those conversations first from you, It will form how they interpret every other thing that they hear along the line. So, issues about gender identity is one issue that your teenager may not necessarily be able to escape. And so, if the people introducing them to this conversation are people who have weird ideas, then that child is going to run into trouble. You want to help your child develop some healthy sense of identity as they grow up and as they go through changes in their adolescence, as they go through puberty. So, this particular issue about physical changes, hormonal changes, is actually about puberty conversations, sex conversations that every parent needs to have with the child, or provide them a trusted adult, a mentor, or a coach that will give them credible information, truth, not falsehood that is peddled everywhere on the internet and with today's young people. So, those are critical factors that contribute, that cause anxiety for young people. There are some other things. When I mentioned symptoms, I mentioned the more extreme things. There are some other factors that can cause anxiety for your child. Issues about brain chemistry. We don't have enough time on this call to get into, you know, um, the neuroscience that contribute to anxiety, but stuff like that exists. Social and school pressures, I've mentioned that. But then there's also the issues of genetics. So some children are more predisposed to anxiety based on genetic factors, based on how their parents would have responded to certain kind of issues. And I've mentioned life stress and other adult issues that can happen in a family and trigger anxiety for your child. Okay, so there are genetic issues. There are health issues that can become sources of anxiety for a child. Maybe a child has some underlying medical condition or something that they're struggling with, a health issue that they're struggling with. That is a factor that can create a lot of anxiety for young people, and you want to provide interventions for them. Certain kinds of medication, certain kinds of medicine, whether prescribed or not, will actually have a tendency to create anxiety. If you um, look up some of the medications that some persons get to use and stuff like that. Then, of course, as I mentioned, medication, I will not fail to mention substance use. When young people start to try out certain kinds of substances and things because somebody is introducing them to one or two substances, marijuana, what do you call all of those names? Okay, alcohol and things like that. They also, while in the short term, those things provide some sort of numbness and high, in the long run, you come back to feel all of those emotions, but worse and in more extreme, you know, experiences like that. So those are some of the factors, those are some of the causes and things that create anxiety for young people. And it's important, like I said, for you as a parent, that you recognize what is going on, recognize what's happening with your teenager. I think there's a background noise, coming. If you can hear that sound, apologies. It's coming from somewhere in the environment. I don't know, maybe a construction uh, thing going on around. I hope it stops, but I apologize for that noise. Okay, but let's continue. It has stopped, but it might continue again. Okay, so I was saying that it's important that you recognize anxiety in your teenager, and recognizing that involves, having constant communication, opening. I said in the beginning that you need to create healthy environments where teenagers are able to express themselves. It will help you better to see what's going on, know when things are out of place, and try to proffer solutions when necessary. Once in a while, ask important questions to help you understand your child's experience, especially when they start going through puberty and start seeing all of those hormonal and physical changes going on in their body, in their mind, and around them in their social circle. Okay. I had a very interesting experience earlier in the week. One of my mentees was celebrating his 13th birthday, and part of the birthday activities that the parents put together was to, bring in trusted adults, myself as a coach and mentor, and some other persons within the family and in their church community to provide practical answers to questions, more like preparing this young man for see what you're going to experience in the next few years of your life. Get ready, see the roadmap, see what's going to happen, and see who to reach out to if you need help. And so you want to be that kind of compass, that kind of guide for your child as they go through puberty and adolescence. Um, there are some other kinds, the really treatments for anxiety, but I'm not going to dwell on that now. I'm going to share, like I said, practical strategies that you can, apply in your journey to help you guide your teenager, more or less support them to overcome anxiety. And number one is the need to change your approach, change your view towards the most important person in the life of a child or a teenager is actually the parents, whether the whether the child kind of manifests this or not. Maybe your level of influence, like we like to say, reduces. Um, they see their peers as more influential. Yes, they see their friends at school as more influential. Yes, but they also watch out for what it is that you are doing, what it is that you are saying, and how you are responding to events yourself. So the place of modeling cannot be overemphasized. As you model, it's important that you pay attention to your approach to anxiety. How do you view anxiety? How you view it and how you respond to it for yourself is going to form a lot of guide, signpost, so to speak, for your child. You need to model a healthy approach. You need to model a healthy response to situations that create anxiety. Let me give you an instance. For younger children, maybe even toddlers or a little older than that, you will notice that if a child, say you're working with a child, the child is playing and there are adults around that environment, and in the course of that play, the child trips and falls down. What naturally happens is the child begins to scan the faces of people in the room and check how the adults respond to that experience. And so, in cases where you respond with who, ha, shout, and things like that, then the child begins to cry. In other cases where you respond in another way, the child more or less like mirrors the responses of adult. It doesn't negate the fact that that child might feel pain or might feel hurt from that experience, but it points to the fact that children usually will interpret events how the adults around them interpret the same events. That's just the lesson there. So how you respond to situations that naturally will create anxiety will model a response strategy for your teenager. Other kinds of response are things like avoiding the conversation entirely. you know uh I'm hoping that maybe I get to talk about that because my time is already running, but essentially the point here is that you approach and view anxiety from a different kind of light. Generally with mental health issues is when you start creating things that are non-existent, then those things will begin to manifest themselves really. So, se- closely related to that is to mention that I said in the beginning that anxiety is a natural emotion. It's a natural emotion, and it's your brain's response to provide you with some sort of auto protection. So you now decide what you want to do. Your brain is prompting you to assess physical danger. Your brain is prompting you to take action that is appropriate and commensurate with the danger that is perceived. So it's a natural thing, but then it can have its extremes, and it can have other kinds of manifestations beyond that simple natural expression. So you want to begin to look at it from that perspective and avoid labeling anxiety as bad. Avoid labeling it as a dangerous emotion. No, it is just an emotion. What you do with the emotion is now a different conversation entirely. But in the basic sense, it is an emotion and it is telling you something. Now you need to take that information, process it, and you know, provide the most appropriate response to that emotion. So, but if you do not learn emotional intelligence, if you do not know how to control that entirely, then you can become a victim of an otherwise harmless natural emotion. And so, it's an important thing for you to emphasize in your own daily approach and in your conversations with your teenager so that you can teach young people, you can teach teenagers to acknowledge their anxiety and not deny it, not avoid it, acknowledge it and then encourage them to ask. Sometimes you're going to feel uncomfortable. I was talking to one of my mentees, again, that was last week. This is a young adult and she put up a post on social media and I saw the post. I called her phone. I said, let's have a talk. But before we talk, take down this post. And because of the level of connection and influence, before we talked first, the post had to go down. And then we start talking about what the content of that conversation is. And the whole essence of the conversation is to let you know that, see, there's nothing happening to you that has not happened. And if you're familiar with your scripture, it says that there is no temptation that comes to you that has not come to some other kind of person in some way or form, as similarly as it has come to you. So you want to encourage your teenager to acknowledge that thing, accept that emotion, accept that sometimes you're going to have uncomfortable feelings. There's again another false narrative that we are selling to young people that the purpose of life is happiness. Sorry to disappoint anybody. The purpose of life is not that you'll be 100% happy 100% of the time. No. The purpose of life is more importantly that you're making a contribution towards the ongoing progress of every other person around you. Disabuse the mind of young people from the level of selfishness that we have sold on social media and even marketed it for some reason that is not within the scope of this conversation. But my point is to address anxiety and some other manifestations of these things as natural as they are so that your child can produce authentic responses that help them overcome whatever it is that they are going through. So it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to be anxious about changes in your body. It's okay to be anxious about how people are going to perceive you. Also recognize that not everybody is going to like you, by the way. It's okay to get scared. Every public speaker knows that before you mount any platform to speak before, no matter how many times you have spoken in public before, the next time you're presented with a public speaking experience, there is that sort of nervousness that comes with the experience. But you have to learn to deal with that and create your own success. That is a more productive response to that emotion than wallowing in the emotion itself. Because I'm going to talk about the next thing that happens is the issue of avoidance. One of the strategies for managing this is that you break the loop. Anxiety has a loop that if you don't break, you will live in that circle for the rest of your life. And when it comes to the treatment of anxiety, for instance, issues like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, even in CBT, there's something called ERP, which is like it is ERP is exposure and response prevention. But in English, it's actually about gradually putting you in those experiences that you're scared of, in measured proportions. And then you get used to the experience in itself. You get to get used to the experience in itself. The good example is the one I've been using, which is public speaking. So this child is afraid of public speaking. Anytime they're going to speak in public, they start having headache, they start shivering and things like that. We're gradually going to put you in places where you have to speak to one person, to two persons, to three persons, until you can speak in class, until you can speak on the assembly ground, until you can speak to a large audience. That is basically how you break the cycle. you will, the other response, the opposite of that response is that you entirely avoid public speaking and you never get to, and the more you avoid it, the more the anxiety for that particular event builds up. So that is one strategy that I just had to jump into. But finally, I talked about personality traits, and it's important that you address the personality component of anxiety. When I say that certain personality types are more predisposed to anxiety than the others. So some personality types are more sensitive to issues, emotions. They're more touchy. The things get to them more. Again, you want to help that young person acknowledge and appreciate the gift of that personality because there's a reason for that. So every personality, there's no bad or good personality. The personalities have strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So you want to, and this conversation now is about self-awareness. You want to expose your child to self-awareness trainings and self-acceptance trainings so that they can understand and embrace their personality with all of its unique potentials and possibilities. And then we can have conversations about this other part of this personality is not really serving us in our current manifestation. So how are we going to deal with it? So address the personality component of anxiety issues. Address the fact that it is a natural emotion. Then break the unnecessary cycle of anxiety. If you do not intentionally break that cycle, then you will live perpetually in it and you're never going to get productive. So that's the conversation I have for you today. Like I said, um, this has been coming up a lot, and so I'm going to have a few more topics around the subject of mental health, anxiety, and stuff for young people in subsequent editions of Friday Live. But for today, we dealt with anxiety. We talked about signs and symptoms. We talked about the causes of anxiety, and mentioned a few strategies for overcoming anxiety. If you need further help, like there's for those on Facebook and on the YouTube, their contact details scrolling on your screen. So you want, if you're on Instagram, send me a DM or something. And there's a course that we have for young people who are experiencing some of these things, and then you want to provide them with more detailed interventions and help for whatever it is that they are experiencing. So if you reach out, I'll probably give you details for that and you can jump in. But aside that, that's it for today. Thank you very much for spending time here with me. I didn't realize we have done 15 minutes, so uh, this is where we call it a wrap. Thank you, Facebook. Thank you, Instagram. And if you're watching me on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And we'll do this again next week, Friday. Thank you. Have yourselves an amazing weekend and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.